the taxes, or you could do both. Let's get the read from Jonas Max Ferris. We've got Francis Newton Stacy here as well, Optimal Capital Director of Strategy, I should say, or strategy, depending on the market and how it's doing. It could be a tragedy. Brandon Arnold is here as well, the National Taxpayers Union Executive Vice President. Guys, thank you very, very much. Brandon, begin with you. You have long argued that this package that targets the wealthy to pay for it won't end up having the wealthy as the only ones paying for it. What do you make of what the CBO has found, which seems to indicate you either tap the wealthy more or you move down the tax food chain? What do you think?
Yeah, actually, the Joint Committee on Taxation released some really interesting data on this last week, and they said people making $50,000 to $200,000 will see tax increases in many years of this plan. Now, people making over $1 million, on the other hand, in the first year of this plan are going to get $47 billion in tax relief. That's more than what they got under Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So this is a really, really messy form of legislation here where you're seeing the middle class get tax increases and the wealthiest getting tax breaks. It's not fair. It's poorly constructed.
You know, Francis, it's going to be probably mightily changed in the Senate if it even gets done in the Senate. So what do you see happening?
Well, what's really interesting is, yes, the Senate is going to have its hands all over it, and I think it will look very different as the infrastructure bill did. However, the thing that is the tax on the lower and middle income bracket is inflation. And inflation is proving not to be as transitory as even I thought it would be in Optimal's strategy of tragedy. But anyway, my point is that the only way to have this new money come in, not exacerbate inflation, is to raise taxes. Because when you raise taxes, you pay more of the federal debt down, and paying that money down then removes it from circulation. Inflation is very simply the amount of money in circulation against the amount of goods. And right now we have too much money, too little goods, and that's what's causing all of these prices to go up. So if you're going to pass this and say it's not going to affect inflation, then you're going to have to raise taxes to make that even mechanically, potentially a reality with a lag effect. And so I think that the Senate is going to have to confront that reality.
You know, Jonas, I'm curious, what if the Senate doesn't agree with this, doesn't pass anything relating to this? How do you think the markets would react to that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the markets have got kind of addicted to deficit spending, to the Federal Reserve are kind of artificially keeping rates low to finance the government spending much more than they bring in with tax revenue, and this has been going on for years. So to kind of end that might be dramatic to the market. But what's worse is if inflation isn't transitory, then because the federal government is not going to do anything about it, which would be raising taxes and cutting spending, then the Federal Reserve has to do the heavy lifting, and that's harder on the market. If you have to raise rates, it increases the borrowing costs of our government. It makes mortgages go higher. That kicking the can to the Fed, so to say, because the federal government can't get anywhere near balancing a budget during a boom economy, is going to cause more harm to the market. To keep this, to the inflation thing, I would argue it'd have to have even more tax revenue than it spends to be non-inflationary, because the Democrats are so focused on taxing more out of the wealthy and giving more benefits to people that barely pay tax now. Again, not making a moral judgment. When you tax Jeff Bezos, that money wasn't getting spent on much. And if you give it to people, whether it's through dental benefits or whatever, that's consumption. And right now, since we're not in a recession, we have an excess of consumption relative to goods being supplied, and that is going to be inflationary. It's the opposite of a trickle-down supply side thing. I know it gets a lot of heat, but in a boom economy where there's too much demand, you don't want to give more to the demand plan that's going to tax.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that compounds itself, though. I mean, if the spending begets more inflation, and the inflation only gets worse with more spending, what are we looking at here? I mean, you might be at the point, Brendan, where even if they hold the line on tax increases to just the super rich like Jonas, then that's one thing. But extending it, expanding it, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I mean, inflation is out of control right now. We have the highest inflation since 1990 when Ice Ice Baby was the #1 song in the land. It's out of control. And their answer to this, of course, is to double down on the failed policies that they've been implementing since day one. The American Rescue Plan Act injected more funds into consumer demand. It ramped up consumer demand at a time when supply was lagging due to logistical constraints, due to manufacturing delays. And this plan would double down on that strategy. It's juicing demand even more when manufacturing and logistics are still being delayed due to COVID issues. So this is going to make the problem a lot worse. It's the reason why people are saying already Thanksgiving is going to be 15% more expensive in terms of your meal. There's going to be shortages of Christmas presents. Some items aren't even going to be on the shelves. Those that are going to be more expensive. This is hitting real Americans in a very significant way.
All right. All right, we'll see, because it's certainly hitting Americans when they go visit the pump, and signs right now that the next stop at the gas station could be setting some records for you. We are all over that and the implications of that right after this.